The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at SQPN.com/merch. And today we will be discussing part 2 of Genndy Tartakovsky's 2D animated Clone Wars microseries. This second part aired on Cartoon Network in 2005. So that's still before the popular 3D animated show. In our last episode, we spoke about part 1. So if you haven't listened to that yet, feel free to catch up first before listening to this one. But I'm your host, Thomas Salerno, and joining me for tonight's review are Pat Mason. Hello, Pat.
Howdy, Thomas.
And Kathryn Laffrey. Hello, Kathryn.
Hello.
And joining us for the first time on Secrets of Star Wars, Jeff Haecker. Welcome, Jeff. Yay.
Hello there.
Hello there. So let's begin first with a brief recap of this second edition of 2D Clone Wars. The Clone Wars continue to rage on as separatist forces, under the command of the fearsome cyborg General Grievous, launch a coordinated offensive across the Outer Rim, tying down Republic and Jedi forces in destructive battles of attrition. Undermanned and desperate for more knights to plug the gaps, the Jedi High Council, with Obi-Wan Kenobi's support, votes to forego the standard trials and elevates Padawan Anakin Skywalker to the rank of Jedi Knight. Meanwhile, Anakin and Padme struggle to live their double lives as Jedi and Senator and as a married couple. Based on intelligence reports provided by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, Kenobi and Skywalker are dispatched to the distant planet Nelvon, where they hope to capture or eliminate Grievous and thus precipitate an end to the war. The native Nelvon people embrace Anakin as a fabled savior hero, the Ghost Hand, and task him with rescuing their menfolk by healing their nature goddess, the Mother. In an underground cavern, Skywalker receives a disturbing vision and discovers a secret compound where the separatist Techno-Union is overseeing a sadistic science operation for Grievous, kidnapping Nelvon warriors as raw materials for their experiments. Anakin frees the Nelvon and destroys the facility, sacrificing his bionic hand in the process and killing the fleeing Techno-Union scientists with the Force. Meanwhile, General Grievous mounts a surprise attack on Coruscant. As the Jedi Council defends against the hordes of battle droids, 3 Jedi, including Shakti, defend Chancellor Palpatine as they are pursued by Grievous and his Magna Guards. Grievous ultimately escapes with the Chancellor. Anakin and Obi-Wan are recalled from Nelvon to mount a desperate rescue operation, leading right into the events of Revenge of the Sith. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun.
But, wow, okay, so before we, tear into this, chock full of everything going on micro series, Jeff, let's let you introduce yourself for listeners who might not know you. Just a little get to know you, sketch of who you are at SQPN and a little bit of your personal history with Star Wars.
Yeah, so if you've listened to Secrets of Middle Earth, I've been on that one for a couple of years now with Thomas and now with Pat. That's where I started with SQPN. I've now also been on several movies and TV, and I'm a regular on The Secrets of Stargate as well. So I'm just kind of making the rounds of the various SQPN shows. But as far as Star Wars, it's probably my first big fandom, outside of like cartoons growing up and stuff like that. It's probably the first big fandom that I really gravitated to and really loved. I mean, I watched it. I remember probably the first time watching reruns on TV is probably 6 or 7 years old, and then we eventually got the VHS tapes as a kid, so that kind of dates me as well. But I would watch them every Saturday morning. I'd before anyone got up, I'd put in probably Return of the Jedi most of the time and watch that one on tape, and then read all the books in middle school, high school. I love the micro series here, so I'm glad to be a part of this episode on it, and definitely watched that one a bunch before episode 3 came out, and just continued loving Star Wars. I love the Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch, most of the sequels, Mandalorian, all that stuff. So overall, I just love Star Wars. It's probably my first and biggest fandom. So happy to be here.
Nice. And
Yar, welcome aboard.
Oh gosh, the pirate's back.
Had to do the great.
Sorry.
Oh
no, I'm not sorry. Never.
Yeah, don't be silly. That was great. But also before we continue, Jeff, I know that you really enjoy the Clone Wars micro series. So what's your kind of brief thoughts on the first sort of quote unquote season of the show, the initial run of 5-minute shorts before we get into this one?
Yeah, I love them. They were just a lot of fun to watch because that was like the first Star Wars TV there was. I mean, I know there was the holiday special, years and years ago, but we don't really count that as a TV show or really anything. But this, I remember watching it. I remember, I think this was back before everyone had Wi-Fi. I think I was at my grandparents' house who did not have internet. I had to use my dad's like dial-up VPN, Wi-Fi thing essentially to watch it on a computer because that was the only way to get it unless you tune in on the channel. So, but I've watched it many times since. I love the little vignettes of different seeing these Jedi actually do some of these impossible things that we really don't get to see much. We see them fighting, of course, but I mean, I think of the Mace Windu episode where he's fighting an entire army by himself and loses his saber and he's just destroying everything, and that just shows you kind of the imagination that Star Wars can have if you in a medium like animation. But and then the stuff with the Ventress stuff, which I know has been changed in the canon, but I kind of headcanon the first part of the Clone Wars micro series with the 2008 CG series, and that's kind of been also recanonized a little bit in one of the books that came out in the last couple of years, where they meet Ventress for the first time. But her introduction here was really cool as well. So yeah, I love the first series and I love this one too.
Nice. All right. So, but before we get into details about this second series, let's just go around and say what we all kind of thought of it in general terms. How about you first, Pat?
So it's really good, but hilariously, this is one of the few times in my life I can remember thinking that I wanted more filler and less of the epic, part of the core story. And not so much I wish there was less of the core story. Like, I wish that was intact, but spread over like another season's worth of the kind of the mini little vignettes we got, like the single planet, single Jedi kind of action. Like, I would have loved to have seen 3 or 4 more. I would have loved to have seen the Ithorian, like on his own battle on the planet. I would have loved to have seen Yoda. It would have been great to get, Yoda with the Wookiees, which we do eventually get in season, or in not season, sorry, Revenge of the Sith. But I would have liked to have seen more of that. And so from that perspective, I wish there was more, but not necessarily more of what we got. But I love season 2 because there's so much of that dynamic between Obi-Wan and Anakin that's done very well, that I do think they do fairly well in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, but there's not enough of it, right? There needs to be more. And this kind of gives that more. And it did give that more going into that movie. And on the other side of it, you get, again, a continuation of what is, in my mind, a much better portrayal of the relationship between Anakin and Padme than they did in, in the Clone War, or the Attack of the Clones.
What about you, Kathryn?
I love the set of cartoons better than the book Labyrinth of Evil.
Oh,
I feel like it bridged the gap better between the movies than Labyrinth of Evil did, which both end with the same thing. They'll lead up right to episode 3. And I loved it. And I mean, for me, some of it's the visuals. I love the art. And so that really draws me into it. But it answered a lot of great questions. Like Pat said, it built up the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin so much better than, anything. And like how they ever thought they could do episode 3 without building that relationship, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then definitely I loved how we got more of Grievous to like really see him as just this annoying little thorn in everyone's side.
Right. Yeah. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, this one, it's a lot of fun, and it has something that I think episode 3 or episode 2 should have had, of showing the knighting of Anakin. That's something that has still, I don't believe it's been seen on any sort of, even in Clone Wars, they didn't show any knighting. I think the only knighting we see is in Rebels when Kanan gets knighted by the Temple Guard in that vision. I think that's the only canon Jedi knighting ceremony, which I think is really unfortunate because it's such a cool scene, and I love that's one of the highlights of this set of mini episodes, is seeing his knighting ceremony and getting elevated to the rank of Jedi, of Jedi Knight, and also, like you said, Kathryn, this is the best Grievous in my opinion as well. Like I've seen jokes that episode 3 Grievous is the worst, the Clone Wars Grievous is second best, and then the micro series Clone Wars is the best Grievous, and I tend to agree with that, because in Revenge of the Sith he comes across very goofy and not really very threatening.
Yeah,
but he first appeared in these episodes, and he's very threatening, especially when you see him. He kind of come in at the end of the last set that y'all covered before, and he's killing everybody, and like defeating all these Jedi and even Masters, even Kaidi Mundi and Aayla Secura were having trouble with him. So I think if they had built that, I think a lot of it is the voice. I was in the Clone Wars in episode 3, if they had just done a different voice and done the more like threatening robotic, it would have worked better. But yeah, I really love that, and yeah, seeing this as like a Anakin, seeing his kind of future written in this parable or vision that he has of the ghost hand leading him to, he gets this hand to protect people, but it leads to him trying to protect people, leads him to destroy everything, which is showing what's going to happen to him in episode 3. So yeah, I really enjoy this set of the episodes as well.
Yeah, I have to agree on Grievous. Grievous was just one of the things when I finally saw episode 3 that was such a huge disappointment. As I said last time, and I really appreciate just how threatening and relentless and scary he is in these micro series episodes. And I just love all of the sort. It is a very cinematic show, and I'm sure there's some things that it does that would have been difficult or impossible to do at the time in live action. But still, I almost feel like there's definitely some of these story arcs and some of these moments, like the Anakin knighting ceremony, which is one of my favorite moments of the whole of the whole thing that I really would have liked to see in the actual prequels, but we just didn't get. But yeah, I really like this one. Overall, I like all the storylines. Like you said, Pat, better Anakin and Padme stuff than we got.
Yeah.
And definitely got the sort of tension of them, living this kind of double life, together, which I found really interesting. And of course, returning Anthony Daniels as C-3PO.
As always.
As
it
always,
should be.
Yeah.
I believe the voice actor for Obi-Wan goes on to do the Clone Wars CG series. I think it's they were able to have him come back and do Kenobi in that as well.
I think so. I think that's him. Yeah.
There might be others, but I mean, he's the most noticeable, I think. Definitely not Anakin. Anakin was different, but between the two, but.
Yeah. So what did you guys think of just the different plot lines in this because like the original series of shorts that they did was more episodic, although towards the end of it you kind of got, there was the Yavin 4 arc and then the stuff going on Munilinst, and then they would have some sort of episodic things going on different planets. What did you think of, like, especially towards the end of this series, you had the kind of two parallel arcs of the Siege of Coruscant and then Obi-Wan and Anakin on Nelvon going on this Anakin going on his vision quest and like saving the people and all that stuff. Did either of these feel, well, obviously the Coruscant one wouldn't feel out of place because they're trying to build towards episode 3, but what did you guys think of these different plot arcs and how they balance them?
I really liked seeing the bonus features with the DVD. And then it's also available on YouTube. One called Connecting the Dots, where the developers talk about the fact that they were so happy to have the second season to really build it into a story. And they were working more in movie mode so that this was almost like, Star Wars 2.5. So it could really fill the gaps, get the good movie storyline going. So yeah, they were really developing the storyline more so that we can really get from 2 to 3 in a nice smooth line of story.
Yeah, I think taken as a whole, it's very well done. You have kind of the set plot pieces of Anakin, sort of his inner turmoil post fight, the problems going on within the Jedi Council, the fact that they're starting to lose too many Jedi, that they've sort of taken ownership of this war, even though it's not really theirs. And you can kind of see the effects that has down the line in episode 3. And just it doesn't feel like it's out of balance or out of conceit to have Anakin and Obi-Wan go off on this mission that then ends up being something of a spirit journey for Anakin. And at the same time, you have the whole fight at Coruscant happening, which is it's kind of both a masterstroke from Palpatine's perspective, but just a lot of fun to watch. Very, very. It has a very Aliens feel to it in a lot of ways. Both, it actually has a little bit of both, because Alien was a sci-fi thriller and Aliens was a sci-fi action movie, and you sort of have both of those combined in Grievous and his Magna Guards in the chase through the city, where you have the vertical chase down the building, literally in the case of Grievous running down the side of the building.
That was great.
That was beautiful.
But then you have also, once they get to the basement, you've got like basically the fight in the parking garage, and then and then them fight at the train station, and then the taking the train and getting away. That whole sequence, it combines those two sci-fi thriller, sci-fi action movie elements so very well. And you find yourself like at the same time, you're like, oh, we're back to Anakin and Obi-Wan. Oh, good. I get to see this storyline progress. And at the same time, you're thinking, I still want to see more of Coruscant. And then when you're on Coruscant, you're thinking, I want to see more of what's going on with Obi-Wan and Anakin. So I think they balance it very well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it because sometimes you need a break from all the crazy stuff that's going on Coruscant and all of the like, intense moments of not just, Grievous like hunting everybody down, but then like the Mace Windu or Yoda fighting off waves of droids. And it's nice to just go back to this sort of like classic sort of fantasy quest that Anakin's on, help this village of people, it's like you can almost see like the little quest update icon show up, like if you're playing a video game RPG, Grimoire updated you with a new quest,
Yeah.
I like the storylines too. For my own personal, ideas, I like the new canon being all kind of meshed together. So it's this set of episodes doesn't really mesh with the canon very much. The Siege of Coruscant stuff could, but it's completely different in the Clone Wars, in the now canon Clone Wars. So it's a little bit now that I'm in my head, I'm like, there's a canon that everything follows. This is harder to watch in that sense because I'm like, it's not canon. I just hear that always going off in my brain, but the Siege of Coruscant stuff is like you said, it's great action and a lot of suspense with the chase through the tunnels. And even though I've seen it many times, it's still getting to watch it again and seeing, Grievous is just so threatening here, and it's just so different from what we got in episode 3, unfortunately. Still great, but I still like episode 3, but yeah, the Grievous here is just a lot better. But I do like this Anakin's vision quest, like you said. I can almost headcanon that takes place a little bit earlier in the Clone Wars, and then it all works together again. But yeah, his, like I said earlier, his kind of learning what he's going to be, but he doesn't realize exactly that it's exactly going to happen like that. He's still, it's kind of a warning, and he can kind of take a lesson from it. And we kind of learn that he doesn't really take a lesson from it in episode 3. He kind of does fall down that path of, you try to protect the one you love or the people you love, and it leads to, the destruction of everything. So, but yeah, I do like these stories though. They're, and back in 2005 when this was on, it was like, this was the only Star Wars TV there was. So I watched it, I don't know how many times, even after episode 3, just because it was like the only thing you could watch aside from the movies. So, but still, yeah, it's a lot of fun to watch, and it looks great. So can't complain too hard about it.
Well, yeah, and Anakin and Obi-Wan's quest is a very Western style story, where you have kind of the old grizzled guy and the younger guy, and they're riding off into the town, and they find all the men folk have been rustled up by the whoever, and then they go off to save them, and it has they projected very like, literally the aliens have, lodges, and they have an elder guy with a smoking pipe, and it's just all very, very telegraphed, but it doesn't, it all works. It doesn't like throw off a red flag. Like, oh, come on guys, what are you doing here? I think it all works very well. And I like the sci-fi sort of integration you have towards the end. Like once Anakin has his vision quest, when he realizes what has happened to the mother and like why it's become so cold, and you put it in terms of technology, and then you have the sci-fi aspect of it. I thought it was all done very well. And it's kind of funny because as he's crawling through the caves, he's sort of going from the sort of world of mysticism and naturalism or whatever into sort of the cold, dark, scientific sort of a thing. And he himself, and that's part of the vision quest, is a combination of those two things, right? He has his hand loss, which like this whole thing works so much better than anything they ever gave us in the Clone Wars 3D, like for explaining Anakin and where he comes from, and even on to Vader in the end, and the loss of Luke's hand, and Luke getting the mechanical hand, and the conversation they have, kind of, but not really. You know, it's not really it's a conversation of the mind they have in the Return of the Jedi. Like, this just plays into that so well. And for this not to be canon, I scream sometimes.
Yeah, I know. And then they lump it in. They label it as vintage Star Wars for some reason.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and lump it in with like the live action Ewoks movies and the animated droids cartoon. Yeah, I'm like,
yeah. I have to say one thing visually with the art when they were doing the parallel stories is all the transitions start with like a close-up of someone's face. And even the very beginning of this section starts with a close-up of the stormtrooper's helmet. And it's really awesome. I tell everybody they got to freeze frame it, because if you look at his visor, in the visor is like this refracted look of all the other troopers around him.
Yep.
Not like a clean reflection, but it's like just broken up body parts almost. So it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah.
But I love how they do like the transition with, to Grievous having the conversation with Dooku, and you have like the close up of Grievous's eyes, or the guy who's wondering how many Jedi are they sending, and his little twitchy eye. It was
twitchy
just awesome.
eye, yeah.
100,000
oh my,
100,000
Yoda,
Jedi.
the close up of Yoda, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that when all of a sudden Yoda's just sitting there meditating, and then you get his look of like, oh, how did I miss this? We must go.
All the droid ships shooting by him in the background, and you're just like, yeah, you missed
So neat way to do the transitions back and forth to have those close face shots.
There are lots of little Easter eggs in this. Not only like you said, that the visor shot with. And I don't know if anyone caught in the subtitles the name of the ARC Trooper commander. His name is Fordo.
Yeah.
Oh, Fordo. Oh, okay.
And I'm like, so are they referencing Frodo, or are they referencing Harrison Ford, like, or both?
So I wonder. So if you played at the time, I think this was out when Knights of the Old Republic was out. There was a Mandalorian in that game, Canderous Ordo. So I wonder if they were referencing that, because if you read there's a series of books that are not canon, that were pre-Disney, the Republic Commando series, but they name there's a group of commandos that they're kind of like super special commandos that they end up naming them each after like a famous Mandalorian warrior. There's like Ordo, there's other ones, but I wonder if that was kind of a tie-in to Canderous Ordo, kind of just trying to come up with a cool name for a trooper, and they pulled that from maybe Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah. I like that we get our trooper commandos back at the very beginning when they're extricating Ki-Adi-Mundi. And they're a little more talky in that, but they're still they're still themselves, I guess. You still got like the one guy with the two guns, the other guy with the heavy cannon, and they're all the weaponry they bring out to like shoot into Grievous.
One guy has like one of those like the quad cannons of the Millennium Falcon strapped to his chest.
Yeah.
How that works. But okay.
Oh, and don't forget the ship painting, the face they put on that.
Yes, the rank they give it rank. They give the gunship Rancor jaws painted like almost like the flying tigers from World War II, where they would paint the tiger maw or the shark maw on the P-40 Tomahawk fighter planes. Yeah. That was cool.
You could tell you could get a feel that the whole sequence was put together by somebody who had at least been a part or had seen or studied helicopter extractions, and then had taken that into, okay, well, if I don't have to worry about getting my blades cut off. What could I do if I had a ship like that? Because it's done so well, both the coming in and the leaving, you know, where they blow up that one path, but it's really not about blowing the robot or the droid troopers up. It's about making a smoke path so they can't be seen to get out. And they try and bring the ship to bear on Grievous, but they still can't get him. And Ki-Adi-Mundi's like, no, we got to go after him. And they're like, no, we got to go. Pull him back into the ship.
Pursue, you know, like, yeah. I like that it picks up right after the first series ended, you know, and you're thrown right into that battle again. Yeah. And I like how initially they drop those timed bombs. And the droids just kind of look down at them and then just keep shooting. They don't kick them away. They don't try to get rid of them. They just keep shooting so that later they can just blow up.
Yeah, no self-preservation programming there, do you?
Which reminds me, by the way, when the guy with the twitchy eye, when he's trying to, you know, how many Jedi are there going to be? I like how the one droid is like, he's like, how many? He's like, 100? No. 50 less, you know. The droids are you know, they have those moments where they hear movement behind them and they're like, did you say something? No. They're really starting to get into the more of like they're not as quirky and funny as they'll be in the 3D show where they're just really over the top, like stupid. Yeah,
I think the idea is that after episode 1 and in episode 2, they were giving the droids more autonomy, and so their personalities kind of develop. So I kind of take that as the start of, you know, at this point in the war, they're starting to develop that, and then like you said, in the Clone Wars, and then episode 3, they do have more of that personality for some of them. So
right, because they're not using the control ships to give them all like one mind anymore. So they kind of develop and also I just think the Separatists have to produce these like a bazillion of them really cheaply. So you got to think that there's like crossed wires and stuff in those like droid brains of theirs. They're just, the factories are just chucking these out by the barrel full. Like we saw one of those factories in motion in like episode 2, and it doesn't seem like those factories have good standards. So I think they're just chucking out a lot of half broken battle droids. Yeah, but we don't get stuff like from Bad Batch. You're like, not the face, like that. In terms of other favorite moments, I do like that sequence where you have Anakin and Padme's sort of rendezvous together to meet sort of surreptitiously. And as that's going on, they pan over like this crowd of aliens in Coruscant. And I think part of that was just so that Genndy Tartakovsky could reference a bunch of other sci-fi stuff and also like other aliens from obscure Star Wars things by putting them in that crowd. I believe I saw Cylons at one point. And
I mean, he could have pulled that from Samurai Jack almost, like that crowd of
yes.
aliens. Like it looked like it, you know, some scenes of Samurai Jack where it's just like there's random aliens and there's not really any explanation. There's just these random, you know, hundreds of different kinds of aliens around. So.
And of course, like you had they had to hold the camera on like a Duloc from the Ewoks cartoon for like 5 whole seconds. You know?
Filled the whole screen.
Yes. I was like, really? Okay, great.
The art of the city scene, like around that crowd and stuff, absolutely awesome. There's one scene where there's hardly any characters. I love how he draws characters far away. Because he does them all the same, where they come to these little pointy feet and little pointy hands. Yes. And so there's a scene of like a big staircase in the lower city. Gorgeous. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's a reference to a Macquarie painting.
Oh,
of Coruscant. Because I have a book of Macquarie's concept art. And I'm pretty sure that staircase was from something he did because originally Coruscant was going to appear in Return of the Jedi. So he did a lot of concept art for it. And I feel like that was referencing one of the paintings. But yeah, it looked like a matte painting. Old school. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It looked like a matte painting. It was beautiful. When I was younger and I saw this for the first time, I was reading a lot of stuff from the EU and the old expanded universe, and they really laid down in that how how prejudiced against aliens the Empire was, where they had this whole thing called high human culture, and like they were just prejudiced against aliens and stuff. And it was almost like when I was younger, I interpreted some of those scenes where they just like close up on Anakin as he's looking at the crowd and he's kind of like side eyeing them, and I'm like, oh, is this kind of like he's showing his sort of spite towards aliens? But I think I was misinterpreting that as a kid.
I don't think Anakin was. I mean, because I think the idea is the Empire's Nazi Germany, and you're alienating, you're othering other people, and I think
alienating the aliens,
right? And there's also the idea that Palpatine, I think, could control human minds better than alien minds, and so that's why he wanted to primarily have a human military so that he could control it a lot easier once he was the Emperor. But yeah, Anakin grew up on Tatooine and had a bunch of alien friends. So I don't think it's that. But I mean, I think by the end, he's definitely just, when he becomes Vader, is just killing. He's like, I'll kill anybody. I don't care. Human, alien, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Don't forget though all the training he got from Palpatine. So I think there's a little bit of the Palpatine bias that he's picked up because he's very suspicious of everyone around him.
Right, yeah.
I mean, to the point he pulls his lightsaber on Padme.
Oh, yeah. Almost chops her head off.
A little foreshadowing.
He just fought Ventress, so maybe he's suspicious of someone.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, following him. And I think they were trying to visually cue that, because originally we don't know it's Padme following him. It's just someone in a cloak.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're trying to visually clue us in that it's like, oh, maybe it's Ventress, but of course it's not. So, but I liked later when as they're talking, and then later 3PO shows up.
Mistress Padme,
and
he's following Padme in a cloak.
Yeah, which leads to one of my favorite lines of this series, where Anakin says, "You look different, 3PO," and he's like, "Oh, it must be this disguise." but of course, he looks different because he has the gold plating now. But that it must be this disguise still makes me burst out laughing to this day. So, because again, it's just perfect delivery by Anthony Daniels. He is underrated as a comedic actor, I think. He's just he has perfect timing, perfect delivery on these lines.
And then they kind of call that back in The Force Awakens when 3PO comes in and he sees Han Solo. General Solo, it's me. You might not recognize me because of my red arm.
Red arm, which he ad-libbed that.
Okay.
He ad-libbed that line.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I learned that in the his autobiography that I listened to on Audible. He said he ad-libbed that.
Of course everyone's going to remember you, 3PO. You're the most annoying.
Yep. Everybody's like, Jar Jar is so annoying. I'm like, you don't remember C-3PO, do you?
He's not that bad. Not as bad as Jar Jar.
But it is funny, though, when he takes the cloak off, they do that sort of sultry music.
Yeah,
because
it's hilarious.
Because they're like, "Let's see your gold plating." He's like, "Here now in this neighborhood." Brilliant. And of course, Anakin says, "Most impressive."
Yeah.
I feel like this series though does the Star Wars self-referential humor better than some of the other recent shows, which kind of lay it on a bit too thick. And especially the Clone Wars 3D series, I felt would sometimes lay on the self-referential humor too much. And I'm like, okay, stop it shouldn't be a crutch, guys. Don't rely on it.
Yeah.
We talked a bit before about the knighthood, the knighting ceremony, and I liked the whole transition in this series from the master and apprentice relationship of Anakin and Obi-Wan to the brothers relationship of them as fellow Jedi together. I really like that. Again, something that was sorely missing from the prequels movies.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. And like I said earlier, it's one of my favorite scenes of that. And I believe in Rebels, when Kanan's knighted, they use the same phrasing, by the right of the council, by the will of the Force. I dub thee Jedi Knight.
They canonized that.
I'm glad that was canonized. And there was a book. It's been a couple of years. It was maybe last year before, called Brotherhood, and it was set. And this is a canon book, and it was set right after Episode 2. And when Anakin is knighted, I don't think they show the knighting in the book, but it's basically like showing how Anakin and Obi-Wan go from being master and apprentice to brotherhood, and it's kind of their first mission outside of the master and apprentice relationship. But and that's actually where Ventress first shows up too. So it's like they kind of tried to like do their own version of this.
Nice.
In some ways, since it wasn't shown in the Clone Wars, because the Clone Wars CG, of course, picks up when he's, closer to Revenge of the Sith, when he's been knighted and has long hair and whatnot. But I love this scene just so much, because he's summoned to the Jedi Council, and of course Anakin's like, I don't want to go. Like, what do they need from me? What do they want from me now? Am I in trouble? Like, just all the normal things. And Obi-Wan's like, when the Council summons you, it's always of great import.
He's like, if I'm here for another tongue lashing, does it matter?
Another scolding.
Yeah.
Angsty teen Anakin.
But I just loved the like liturgical feel of it all.
Mm-hmm.
That you go in and it's all in the dark, and then they light up with the lightsaber. And just that phrase, by the right of the council, by the will of the Force. There's something very ordination about it that I just really liked.
It was also neat right before they go into that. Obi-Wan and Anakin have one last, I'm your master, you're my student, and just kind of like have it out to the point of like, okay, it made the knighthood stand out even more, because there was that one last little quarrel. I'm ready for more, and so I liked how they did that.
I love how that quarrel ends though, because Anakin says, well, you're no Qui-Gon Jinn. And you can see the look on Obi-Wan's face, and then Anakin's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's like, hey, we both miss Qui-Gon Jinn. And then you get that sort of feed into, we're transitioning at this point. Like we both miss Qui-Gon Jinn. We're both going to miss him at the same level.
Yeah.
And I like the discussion in the council that occurs before that, and how it's primarily a practicality sort of a thing. Like, okay, well, we don't have the general trials. He hasn't gone through the trials. Well, yeah, but we've been using him in the field, and he's been going through all these trials. And it's all this back and forth about the practicality of like how we always do it and how it's done. And Yoda at the end just like, let's like, there is a practical need for this, and let's just trust the Force on this one, guys. Let's trust the will of the Force. And I love the fact that there's a payoff on that the missions they send him on very much become like what we see down the line. Effectively, the two missions become both the practical test, which is him sneaking into the city and then finding the thing and causing the siege to end months earlier than it was going to end. Which one of the best lines ever. Like, what do we do now? Oh, now we swim. I was afraid you were going to say that.
Oh, and I like that whole thing that he does. Like, well, I suppose what we do now is that we sneak in, go through all that stuff, blow up the generator, and then our troops storm in. And Anakin's like, yeah, let's go. It's just like,
yeah, hey, you figured it out.
But I love how like their banter in that is like they've been doing this for a long time. Like you get that feeling that like they know each other so well. And they work together as like a well-oiled machine. I like that a lot. Yeah.
But then you have, the next mission is the spiritual side of the ball, Like the what's the reality of the situation? Okay, we can go in and wreck the techno folks and just walk away, right? Techno union guys. But it becomes especially from Obi-Wan sort of leaning, it becomes like, no, let's do this the right way. Let's see it from the indigenous culture's perspective. Let's go with what they say. Let's let their blue drawing bugs crawl across our skin. And what's he saying? It says it might hurt a little bit. Is this really necessary?
You must be respectful of their culture, he says.
Yes. And it all sort of, you see the real preparation of Anakin for the test point, right? Because he even gets the vision. And then we see still at the very end of the fight, he still gives into his anger. And he kills those 3 techno unionists in a very unmerciful, fairly un-Jedi manner. I mean, he literally like crushes one of them.
Yeah, he crushes that dude's head.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
With his ghost hand.
With his ghost hand. Yeah.
It's his first force choke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then like earns the undying loyalty of all those Nelvon guys.
Right. Because you have like that sort of, that is now built into his mind that like, okay, maybe this like giving into your anger thing, like it let me beat Ventress and it let me complete this challenge and cause like the loyalty, and I was able to bring them back home and do it. So maybe this whole anger thing isn't so bad. One can't just have the dogmatic viewpoint of the Jedi. Kind of a thing.
You can see where he's going. Yeah. And they did the whole point of the spiritual trial, and they talk about this in the council debate, is facing the mirror, they call it. And learning to accept oneself is what Obi-Wan says. So how do you think that, does Anakin really face himself through the course of this trial? And if he does, what does he come away with? Does he come pretty much? I guess he comes away with what you just said, Pat, that giving into my anger is not such a bad thing.
Well, we also
That's
see
interesting.
And I don't remember exactly when it occurs, but he has a vision, or it's kind of a vision of when he was a little kid with Qui-Gon.
Yes.
Like they see, it's almost like the Dagobah trial that Luke had.
Yeah.
Master, I'm afraid, because of course Yoda says fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate leads to suffering. So Anakin has fear, and that's why he ends up falling, is because he's afraid of losing Padme, and that's what leads to his fall. So he's definitely giving into the anger, but the fear comes first, I think. And even though he's the most powerful Jedi ever, he's still fearful because of what he could lose, and he wants the power to control it, which is ultimately, like we said, what leads to his fall after he agrees to follow Palpatine in order to save Padme, which leads to her death, of course.
It was interesting watching it again today, especially after the homily I heard in Mass. The priest was talking about how lying is not trusting God. Because, you tell the truth and you get in trouble, something happens to you, God will take care of it, kind of thing. So Anakin constantly giving into the fear of losing Padme, even though he's seen what it will do to him in these visions, is him not trusting the Force will let all of this work out. So it's like he keeps giving in. It's like his repetitive sin of just, the fear. I got to control this. His pride. So I thought it was really interesting just to see him constantly fall in spite of knowing what's going to happen to him.
Yeah. And I do think he gets the mirror reflection pretty starkly with what happens to the other warriors, right? Like he literally witnesses one of the transformations occurring, and all the other warriors with the reduction of their hands into machines. It is very much a similar situation, and watching the all of them have that. It's not a collar, but it's like a control vest, basically, that's on them that then controls their mind and causes them to act, unnaturally or in the Techno Union's will. And so he's shown that. He's shown what happens if he goes down this path. Mm-hmm. And then yet he still gives in to the anger on the other side of it.
I mean, all of us sinners are so much like that, right? We know what, once you go down the dark path, right? We know where that leads, but we often just, in that moment of temptation, you're not thinking rationally, and Anakin certainly shows that in episode 3. Like when you're full of fear, you don't think rationally, and often when we choose to sin or go after some lesser good, like you said, Kathryn, it's where we don't trust God, or we're afraid that we might lose something or not have something, or so in that need for control, that need for control over, because what does the serpent tempt Adam and Eve with in the garden? You'll become like gods. You'll have more control over your own fate, essentially.
And it was neat to see then the witness of warriors, the great cloud of witness, seeing Anakin fall to the temptation and Ghost Hand choke the guy, crushing his helmet. And they all see that and rip off their tech, knowing that they could use it for hunting later on, now that they have their minds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then they're like, whoa, we do not want to give in to that, what we just saw. And then to see the look on Anakin's face, it was like he almost realized they get this better than I do.
That's interesting. Yeah. On a sillier note, I did like the sort of mad scientist aspect of what the Techno Union were doing, and that argument between the head scientist and his lackey about, or the lackey's like, they're not ready yet, sir. And he's like, I said unleash the specimens. And he hits this button and they all break out, unleash them. I'm like, that made me laugh. That was great.
Very, very mad scientist, very Resident Evil.
Yes, that's right.
Same kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, before that too, seeing Anakin's giant leap of faith because he has to climb super high up and then he just has to jump, and like I said, the stuff they show in this is something you really wouldn't see it in a live action Star Wars, most likely, because you can just do a lot more in animation, but it just, the scope of it was just awesome, seeing him jump and then to stick his hand into the energy field to grab that crystal, that just that scene, because that's setting up, he has to, that's completing his quest. He has to do that, lose his, hand it for the second time, and then he's gonna lose the hand again, and at least one more time in Return of the Jedi too. So but seeing that quest completed there, but then he, like you said, he chooses the path of anger after that. He solved the problem, and at that point, they could have taken the Techno Union taken them prisoner. But no, he's going to do his dark side thing, and giving into that anger, like you said.
I was wondering too if were they using a kyber crystal to power that thing? That's almost what it looked like.
It did
kind of look like that.
Yeah. It's also interesting to see how all of the troopers that went down with them were wiped out right away by the big beast.
Oh, yeah. You don't ever see those guys again.
They were all stepped on. I was like, okay. Oh. So, yeah. Any support they had was gone. They were on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They had the ships in orbit, so I guess they could have called for more guys, but I think Obi-Wan's like, nah, we got to take care of this. We need a small footprint. I like, though, that they hand wave away that he can understand them by saying, he's like, look, I've traveled the universe with Qui-Gon Jinn, so I know stuff. Although, did anyone notice the creepy visual in the scene with the shaman where you see his shadow at first and his hands are sort of like, up in the air, claw-like. But then when they pan down to him, his hands are in his lap and he's using a mortar and pestle or to grind something. And I was like, ooh, that was creepy. Like, his shadow is different from what his body is doing.
Did you catch his Latin?
Oh, yeah. Was that Latin? I thought...
when he's throwing the stuff, the incense on the fire, no, he does a little Sanctus.
That's right. Yeah, he says Sanctus Spiritus. That's right. And then, but what the other village members, they sound like they're speaking Italian run backwards.
We should try
it. Take it forward, see if it's actually Italian.
Yeah, they maybe they weren't counting on anybody catch that Latin. Yeah, now that you mention it. So yeah, I guess before we wrap up the capture of Palpatine, because that leads directly into, Revenge of the Sith. I like his whole act that he's putting on the whole time of just kind of incompetent Chancellor Palpatine, or is like, I'll handle this, and he's trying to ward off Grievous. How dare you barge into my apartment? And
so great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I will not be bullied by any common thug. It's just like, man, I'm like, you piece of work. And the whole time, he's just waiting for these Jedi to die so that Grievous can capture him.
That one scene where he's just sort of like, the fighting's going on, and he sort of looks around and just steps into the shadows.
Oh, that was creepy.
So good.
Yeah.
Because that shadow line was just like his hood.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Little moments in that. I love when they're waiting for the elevator to come, and the one Jedi does what we all do and starts pressing the button, jamming the button to make the elevator come faster.
Come on. We gotta go.
I liked the fight in the train station. That was really neat.
Yeah. I like the Ithorians yell, like, because you don't really see Ithorians like. I mean, you see them talk, but they have the four. I think you said the four throats or whatever they have.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm, presumably using the Force to amplify that to take out those guards. But yeah, that was a lot of cool touches in this scene. And it's just funny seeing Palpatine playing, like you said, playing the active. And I'm always of the opinion that he's using the Force to cloak his appearance. Like, he actually does look all nasty and gross, but it's when he's fighting Mace Windu in Revenge of the Sith, he lets the glamour down and everybody can see, and he can blame it on the Jedi. Because you do see him in the couple transmissions in these series where he's got like the nasty teeth and the cloak and whatnot. But yeah, this whole chase was great. Seeing, and like you see this giant like elevator to like I guess it's like the presidential bunker that takes you so far deep that you can't be, nothing can get to you. But of course, Grievous gets him.
And I liked in this how they try to explain why in Revenge of the Sith, Grievous has that cough.
Yep.
And they do that by having Mace Windu crush his chest cavity with the Force.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and they have such a good use of like the concept of fear and like threatening abilities, because you see Grievous's chase, they never really get over the fear of Grievous.
No.
Like there's a couple points where they manage to trip him up by using the Force, like on the wall, and then they get him to stop just for a moment by shooting that cannon out the window in the elevator. But for the most part, from the Jedi's perspective, this is still a fully, armed and operational variable opponent. Whereas, like, in the scene we get earlier where he is with, training with Dooku, Dooku's just telling him constantly, like, if you don't have this fear and if you don't have them on their back foot, you're going to get chopped to pieces, because in the end, you're just a cyborg. You move really fast, but if they've got the Force, they're going to take you apart. Mm-hmm. And you see that a little bit, and is it Shakti? I'm trying to remember the Jedi's name, who ends up taking on the Magna Guard.
Yeah, Shakti.
Yeah, Shakti.
You can see as they're coming, she still has that fear mindset. But as she starts to fight them, it starts to dissolve, and she just sort of begins to own them completely, because she realizes, like, yes, they're far more capable than your average battle droid, even the Mark IIs, but they're still just droids. And you don't really, like, you see just a little bit of that from Mace Windu, where he's just like, yeah, whatever, I'm crushing your chest. Like, but the other, it's such a good use of fear. And it's sort of, I've thought through those scenes, I wonder if that is what Palpatine's really doing while he's being chased. He's just sort of palpitating them with fear as they're going. And the reason Shakti is able to take the Magna Guard down pretty handily is because she's not near him anymore. And once she gets that first bit of confidence taking them out, she's like, oh, I can do this.
And then look, the fear grips her when she realized what's happening as they walked away into the shadows. And she must have been like getting the vision from Palpatine just to watch them die. But wow, that was such a powerful scene. I was like, those are my two favorite new Jedi. Why do they gotta die?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Mace was like kicking it in this.
Yes.
All over the place, jumping from his ship onto other ships, taking over the droid ship, and
doing the whole Ratatouille thing where he
was controls it by controls it by its
yeah.
But it's so funny. It's like, okay, he only fell from the window, right? So he could still be alive. I mean, if he can do that, he could still be alive.
Yeah, that was great. One more before I forget. There's also one little moment. Somebody mentioned that the training scene between, Dooku and Grievous, and then Palpatine shows up, Sidious, and he's like, asks how the plan is going, and I never noticed this as a kid, but Grievous says this redundancy. He says, "The unsuspecting fools know not what awaits," and I'm like, well, of course they don't know what awaits if they're unsuspecting. So it's a redundancy, but whatever. It sounds cool until you realize how kind of stupid it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also get to see Yoda just riding around his little deer horse thing.
Yeah, why don't we ever see that again? I love that.
Yeah.
He's warm weather. I call it a warm weather tauntaun.
Yeah. Go home, boy. It's not safe for you here.
Aw.
Yeah,
little eye visor things. And
oh, yeah. And of course, you get to see Yoda crash giant ships together with the Force, and just like he pushes all the droids back into one of the landing craft and then pushes it away.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a great space jump too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that Jedi?
Oh, yeah. Oh, what's that guy's name? Yeah, the fighter pilot.
Yeah, and he's got the horns and everything. But yeah, to watch him just like, we're going to space jump from one ship to another.
I think it's CSC-10.
That's him.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. But, sir, I like it. As soon as he gets on board, the guy's like, sir, the ship is lost. Then it's time to get a new one.
That's so good.
There's so much great stuff in this show. Just, yeah, all of these are just pure awesome. And that's why I think, I really wish we would get more sort of 2D animated Star Wars in the future. Everybody likes to do 3D animated stuff now, but it's like, man, I really, there's just something just so much more kinetic that you can do with 2D animation. Mm-hmm. And Kathryn, I don't know if you know why that is, but is it?
It's more real. It's more material. It's, with the computer animated stuff, even though you can get a drawing pad and a digital pen or brush, it's fine, but you can tell it's just not, you're not feeling it, you're not touching it, you're not scratching the paper. So it does, kind of flatten everything, sterilizes everything. It's a good way to put it. It sterilizes it. You got to have a little messiness, a little hand drawn. And I know they kind of worked into that with Rebels, of trying to get a hand-drawn look with a digital world. And they kind of did, because some of the stuff looked like it was drawn with crayon, which I thought was really cool.
Right, so, and Bad Batch, too, where you could almost see, it looked like paint brush strokes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's one other scene we didn't talk about, and that was the gifts. We have the exchange of gifts. Right. Between Anakin and Padme, where, she gets his Padawan lock and, she tucks that away with the Japor snippet and then looks over her shoulder and is like, oh, R2, send him to Anakin.
Right, yeah. And so, it's funny because Anakin made C-3PO, but C-3PO basically ends up serving Padme most of the time. And R2 was originally in Padme's service, but then he ends up basically as Anakin's co-pilot droid. Yeah. So, yeah.
And we see the same thing with Luke and Leia, where Luke ends up with R2 and Leia has C-3PO for most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other observations or thoughts before we wrap up this discussion of the 2D Clone Wars?
I just love the final scene where they jump back to, where it shows Coruscant and it shows the scope of the battle. Like it shows it zooming out, and you see just these tons and tons of ships, and just how epic this battle is going to be. Because this was, like we said, this was before Episode 3 came out, so this is kind of your first tease of what that was going to be. And then the first scene of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, is that big battle. And it's just really cool. So I just love how they kind of tie that right in, and like I said, even though this doesn't mesh as well with, now that it's, with the new canon, I still like that scene as kind of a lead into Episode 3.
Yeah, and that scene makes me want to watch Episode 3 more than the new stuff. So I was ready to I want to watch that right now. Cue it up.
And I like when they get word that Palpatine's in danger, and then Anakin starts marching off and barking orders. He's like, prepare all fighters, move into hyperspace. And I almost expect someone to be like, yes, Lord Vader.
Yeah. No, in my mind, this is still the canon. I'm just, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, the whole of 3D Clone Wars happens in that battle montage. I think.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, but before we end this latest discussion of Secrets of Star Wars, we'd like to take a moment to thank our great patrons who make this show possible, including Matthew K., Teresa H., Robert G., Sean L., and Susan R. Their generous donations help us to create the Secrets of Star Wars and all of the shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And we'd like to hear from all our listeners. What are your thoughts on the Genndy Tartakovsky 2D animated Clone Wars series? You can let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com. You can hit us up on our social media pages or leave a comment on our channel on the StarQuest Discord community, which you can find at sqpn.com/Discord. Until next time, Patrick Mason, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And Kathryn Laffrey, thank you as well.
Thank you, Thomas. This was fun.
And Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining us on this one.
Thanks, Thomas.
And once again, I'm Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Middle-earth. Find it wherever you can find podcasts or at sqpn.com/Middle-earth.